back with the Wheel of Time reviews, talking about The Gathering Storm, Book 12. This will be spoiler filled. I'm happy to say, guys, that I'm finally back to properly enjoying this series. This was the first time since Book 6 for me where I was genuinely excited to keep reading, and it's also been just as long since I felt this much emotion and tension while reading. That being said, this video may be shorter than usual. If I'm being fully honest, I have very little motivation left for this series, and I kind of just want to get it done. So I'll be simplifying this down to just my thoughts on the main events of the book. Won't be summarizing as much as I usually do. Otherwise, this video honestly just would never come out. It's been like a month since I last uploaded, probably longer. So sorry to anybody who enjoys the usual level of detail I go into. This could still be like an hour long with just my thoughts. I guess we'll see. Book 12 is definitely one of my top books in this series. That being said though, while I don't consider myself a critic at all, I do want to be somewhat critical in my reviews. So it's been over a month since I finished this book, and now that I can look back on it without that initial rush from finishing and without any kind of recency bias or anything like that, honestly, looking back on the contents of this book, I only really loved Rand's arc and stuff relating to that and Nynaeve. The rest of the characters and their arcs didn't really do much for me besides best girl Perrin. Well, second best girl considering Nynaeve exists, but this is the first book written by Brandon Sanderson. I thought he did a great job. It's easy to criticize the changes after the transition, but you gotta think about how huge a challenge it would have been to finish off this saga. Overall, I think the swap from Jordan to Sanderson was pretty seamless. There were some changes though. I'm not sure on the best way to describe the change in the prose. I guess I would say it kind of felt more abrupt, like sentences and dialogue were in shorter bursts, and there was less flowery descriptions. But yeah, other than that, it was pretty seamless to me. The differences that took away from my enjoyment of the book a bit were with the characters. Pretty much all of the main characters felt a bit off to me besides Nynaeve. It wasn't a negative in every case. Rand's arc was still phenomenal, and a change in the character could be expected after his run-in with Shamraj last book. Egwene felt a bit off too, but it's Egwene, so I don't give a shit. The characters I didn't really enjoy after this, though, were Matt and Perrin. I did watch the review from Mike's book reviews after I finished the book, and he said that Sanderson had difficulty with writing Matt. That does make sense. Matt in this is a bit of a dick who tries too hard to be funny and never really is. His ramblings about women swindling you and being goats and fake identities were just way too over the top and overdone to me. He was also seeming very more self-centered to me. Like, he had another rambling session where he talked about the Dark One chasing after him, and it just very me. Matt has always had this why me mentality, but it was just another thing that felt kind of overdone in this. Sanderson does understand the character though. When Rand and Nynaeve met with Tuon and they defended him, you could see that. They talk about how he's a good man, and while he might be a little rough at times, he's as solid a friend as one can hope for. And then Nynaeve talked about how he has a heart of gold. So yeah, I think Sanderson does have an understanding for the character, unless that scene was just entirely written by Jordan. You know, Matt is a cheeky rogue with a heart of gold, and a lot of his humorous moments are him being funny when he isn't necessarily trying to be. Like, a lot of his humorous moments come from his just complete lack of self-awareness, like how he just doesn't like Luca because he's too much of a cheeky flirt, and how he thinks the band are the ones being horrible influences on Oliver and corrupting him. The way he interacts with people is off as well in this. Chapter 20 had one of my favourite Matt moments in the whole series, where he completely owns Joline, saying that he thought she'd just barely be able to do some basic math. I love this moment, but it's out of character. You know, Matt started standing up to Aes Sedai just like Perrin and Rand have, but he's never been an outright rude person like this, and it shows with how he interacts with others. Like, I think it was Talmains or Vannin, but the way he pokes fun at him is just, isn't really entertaining and humorous. Like, they're just joshing around. It just felt like Matt being a dick. I can't remember which one it was. So like I said, it's been a while since I read this. You know when you get disappointed that something didn't go the way you expected it to, and other people just tell you, oh, you can't be upset just because things didn't go the way you expected it? The moment with Joline felt like a reverse of that. I was super happy that it happened, but did it actually make sense for the character? And Sanderson tries to explain it away with Matt being upset with and missing Tuon. Not a fan of that personally. I don't think it's totally believable. Matt is also somebody with a conscience. He would never go as far as theft. Personally, I thought what he did in Hinterstap went against that. I thought it was really scummy that he planned on using his luck abilities to essentially con the whole village out of all they had during such hard times. If I'm remembering correctly though, he did leave some gold behind when he left, so it wasn't all that bad. So yeah, I wasn't crazy about Matt in this, but I think any author chosen to finish off the series would have struggled with balancing all the different aspects of Matt's character. The other main character I wasn't crazy about in this was Perrin. I will always have an unconditional liking for Perrin because of the first four books, and I also just love the whole idea of Wolf Brothers in general. And I'll just always be excited to see more from Perrin. But Perrin as a character fucking sucks. It is time to pull the plug on any hope of Perrin being great. I know book 13 is meant to be his book, but there's literally 0% chance that Perrin finishes higher than like B tier for me in terms of characters, unless he just achieves peak, I mean, absolute peak character writing in one book, which I honestly doubt because it seems like Sanderson is just redoing what has already been done with Perrin in his own way. And like in this book, he went on about wanting to control the world of dreams. So if it just feels like book 13, like going off the pacing that this series has shown me so far, it seems like it's just going to be slow as fuck for like 700 pages, then 100 pages of really fast paced Sanderlanche or whatever. And then in those really slow 700 pages, it's just going to be us having to experience what Perrin has already done in previous books, as well as just doing what Egwene has done with the Wise Ones, learning to use Talerner Yod. But for Perrin, it's the Wolf Brother version. It's not like Perrin has had some kind of gradual slow burn arc that could lead to a satisfying climax. He's just been shit after book 4. I think the only arc I have enjoyed from Perrin since book 4 has been his small arc during book 8, but this book manages to give him the craziest character regression ever with just 4 lines that make it as if book 8 didn't even happen. He says Alejandre can swear to Elaine, he says he doesn't want to be a lord anymore, or something like that, and that a new one can be sent to the Two Rivers, and he's even saying that he's never liked the Wolfhead banner and he wants it brought down. You know, he basically goes against every little bit of a progression he achieved during book 8. Like, Fael has actually just ruined Perrin as a character. I really like Fael as a character herself, but the relationship has brought Perrin down so much. Like I said already, I think Sanderson did a great job and it really is commendable. It's infinitely better than not getting a continuation to the series at all, and I think fans should of course be grateful, but I just can't bring myself to ignore the things that I see as cons just because we did end up getting something. My brain doesn't function that way. I can't just go, who cares, at least we got something, you know? One change that was an immediate improvement to the book with this book, though, was the change in the way it's structured regarding POVs. There's no more big blocks of chapters with the same character, and it flows so much better. There are equal share of Rand and Egwene in this, and I didn't even notice that there was that much Egwene in this book until I checked afterwards, because we don't spend needlessly long with the same POV like we've been doing since book 7. Getting into the contents of the book now, before even talking about the characters though, quick comment on the prologue. I understand that Jordan left no notes for Masema, but it is incredibly disappointing that we spent so much time on him, and then in the end he just ends up not really getting any proper conclusion to his character or any kind of depth to him. He's just killed off by Fael and her fake Aiel because he needs to be after the Malden battle, which I'm not even going to think about the logistics of. So, same as usual, I'm going to talk about the characters in order of appearance. Rand was actually the first POV for the first time in a long time. I've already given most of my thoughts on Matt and Perrin, so I'm not going to be talking about them again. Rand's arc was amazing. I really loved it. There were so many great moments. Most of this video will probably be on Rand. I think the idea of how this was first introduced to Rand's character all the way back in book 4, and he's been struggling with it ever since. He's been constantly telling himself and those in his circle that he needs to get harder, and we've seen him be referred to as hard as steel by some of the characters. And we can see the effect that this has had on his outlook on the world straight away at the start of this book, when he's dealing with the captured Soldam and the Mani, and he says, "Right was easy to find when all I had to care for were a few sheep." After Nynaeve says that it wasn't right to send them back to Abu Dar. Rand's struggle with trying to be hard is brought to its peak after the chapter in which Shemiraj escapes and colors him with the Male Adam. This for me was the best chapter in the series since Demise Wells. I was sweating from the moment Rand was collared until the chapter was over. The tension and sense of uncertainty I felt while reading this were emotions that I hadn't felt while reading this series in so long, and they were well missed. We finally get a look at the depths of Shemiraj's infamous sadistic nature and how she tries to bring Rand complete and utter suffering and despair, all the while seeing the desperation and fear that Rand feels after spending such a large portion of the story trying to gain power while becoming hard, and in an instant is made completely powerless and only can look on in horror as he's forced to choke Mint to death. You know, that was such an insane and disturbing moment, and that image of Rand trying to just choke Min out against his will was just had my heart pounding. And then this moment of desperation leads to Rand channeling the true power for the first time, which I thought was hype as fuck. I even said on Discord while I was reading that I hoped the earlier scene with Soraleya and Conswain was a kind of Chekhov's gun situation, and that somebody would end up colouring Rand and forcing him to use the true power instead of channeling the one power. I think the chapter with Shemiraj perfectly highlights the tragedy of Rand's arc as the Dragon Reborn, because I feel like the main factor, or at least one of the main factors for Rand's descent into madness, has been control. We've continuously seen all these women around Rand think they know what's best, whether it's for him or the fate of the world, but they all ultimately try to control Rand in their own way rather than try to guide him or help him. And we've seen it with like the two emissaries in book 6, Cadsuane, Alaida, even Nynaeve now in this book, who genuinely cares for Rand's well-being, sees him as a problem to be fixed and controlled in her own way rather than a man in need, as Min pointed out at some point. I'm sure Elaine is going to be, or not Elaine, Egwene is going to be much worse in this regard going forward, considering how she's acting after the White Tower attack. And this always leads to tension with Rand and causes him to lash out at their manipulations. The only one who's ever understood the give and take relationship required to properly guide Rand was Moiraine, and I feel like this pretty nicely links into the whole central theme of balance present within the series, which I'll actually talk about later, because I feel like the ending to Rand's arc has actually kind of forgotten that theme a little bit. And after we get Darth Rand, there's just so many great moments from him and really great lines. I can't list them all in this video. One of my favorite lines, though, of the whole series so far was from Rand when he said, "Cadsuane, do you believe that I could kill you right here, right now, without using a sword or the power? Do you believe that if I simply willed it, the pattern would bend around me and stop your heart by coincidence?" Such a good line. I really love that. The best Darth Rand moments for me were his confrontation with Nynaeve over Lan, Natron's Barrow, and probably Tam's outburst, or the outburst at Tam. After he becomes cold and emotionless, Rand focuses even harder on doing what needs to be done regardless of what he wants, and he ends up extending that to the people he uses. Rand gets to a point where he just completely disregards the weight of the human lives that he does use, because that they are needed in the battle with the Dark One. And I think the best scene to showcase this is the one where Nynaeve is concerned about Lan, because Lan is pretty much destined to die without help from Rand, and Rand doesn't see him as a friend in need at all. He sees him more as a tool that can be used up as a distraction, and says that Lan deserves what's coming to him, and this leads to a really great conflict between Nynaeve and Rand. Personally, I agree with Rand on this one, to be honest. Like, Lan was the one being impatient. Rand was literally working towards getting Lord Ituralde to work on the Borderlands, but Lan just couldn't talk to Rand about it and went to do a death charge by himself. So in my eyes, if Lan dies, it's on him as well. I'm thinking the same way Rand was. I guess Lan does die because we had that vision of Nynaeve kneeling over a corpse in grief. Not sure who else that would be over. And then we see again Rand's complete disregard for the weight of human lives when he says, what's his name? He sends Ramshalan to face Grendal and be compelled by her, despite the risks he knows associated with that. And we see in this chapter just how far Rand has gone, and he completely wipes out Natron's Barrow, the whole surrounding area, and the palace with a huge balefire attack. In my opinion, Rand's plan was brain dead. He just explained to Nynaeve that Grendal was the most crafty person ever, and said that his plan with Ramshalan was like punching Grendal in the face before she could make a move. But to me, it just seemed like he essentially sent a big flag saying, "Yo, I'm coming for you." Maybe my brain is too small to comprehend the whole plan there, but that's what it seemed like to me. I know the compulsion was gone afterwards, but I highly doubt Grendal is actually dead. This might be a bit sadistic of me, but I really love stories where you get to really see the depths that a character will fall to, because it makes their eventual rise back up so much more satisfying and rewarding. And once again, we get great conflict between Nynaeve and Rand after Natron's Barrow, where Nynaeve goes as far to say that she loathes what Rand has done, because hate would be an understatement. And then finally, we get the reunion between Tam and Rand, which was really just tragic. They finally get back together after I don't even know how many books. I think they last saw each other in book 1, I think, when Rand is escaping the Trolloc attack. And we see Tam try to help Rand with these feelings he's been having, and his concern over not being able to choose his own fate. And everything just goes to shit as soon as Tam mentions that Cadsuane was the one that brought him to Tyr. Rand gets suspicious and suspects the usual Aes Sedai manipulations and goes complete scorched earth. He's getting ready to wipe out everybody in the Stone of Tyr with balefire, in just a state of pure rage. I loved Tam's reaction to this. He doesn't see Rand as a monster. He just immediately demands to know what Cadsuane done to make Rand this way. He is such a good father. And I instantly lost literally all interest in Cadsuane after this scene, because she's just another bully like the rest of the Aes Sedai. I thought she would be a bit more of an interesting character, but no, she's just another bully with a bit more prestige. And the moment with Katswin and Tam is pretty much just copy and paste of a moment with Swan and Bryn, I think it was, from earlier on in the series, but whatever. This brings us to the ending of Rand's arc, which, if you remember what I said about theme earlier, you may have guessed I was not really much of a fan of. I thought it was absolutely perfect right up until the second last to last page. Rand goes to Dragonmount and has this huge internal philosophical battle with himself, and he's wondering what the point of doing everything again and again is, and he almost wipes out the whole pattern doing the Dark One's job for him. And I love when characters have this kind of internal philosophical struggle with themselves. It's very Sanderson-esque. I wouldn't be surprised if this whole scene was just Sanderson without Jordan's input. But having this kind of philosophical questioning going on is incredibly risky, because for me, the more a character goes on with it, and the more philosophical and complex the questioning gets, the more the answer needs to be absolutely perfect. It needs to make sense for the character, and it needs to make sense for the series that it is occurring within. The satisfaction I feel from the answer to the questioning should be directly proportional to the hype and build up I felt from the questioning itself, regardless of whether or not I would necessarily agree with the answer given. Rand was almost agreeing with the Dark One. He was asking, what if the Dark One was right and everything did need to end? Why does everyone need to suffer again and again? Why do people need to live life over and over? He was saying everything was pointless. Rand has been continuously pushed and prodded and forced to endure so much at the expense of himself and at the expense of others, and his first answer to this philosophical crisis is because each time we live, we get to love again.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
I've looked at a good few Goodreads reviews for this book. Everybody loves this moment, even people that think this book was mediocre, and even some of the straight up negative reviews as well. Like, does nobody see the irony in this line? This is Wheel of Time, the series that is full of insta love. Yes, if I had 3 of the baddest women in the land fall in love with me with literally zero effort, and I got to be with all 3 of them, I also would not mind going another round after I died. I just think it is wild, absolutely insane, that you would have a series with as much issues with its romances as Wheel of Time and have this line and say that we do it all again so that we can love again. I just think it completely misses the mark. And it feels not out of character, but it does feel out of series. Like I said earlier, the primary theme of the series has always been balance to me. The Aes Sedai symbol is yin and yang, for crying out loud. And it seems like the primary message was that balance is needed, and when something is out of balance, it goes to shit. The most obvious example being the world literally dying now that the Dark One is gaining more power, but there's tons more of examples, and not just physical ones. I mentioned earlier with Moiraine and Rand, they were the ones who worked towards a more balanced relationship, and it was one that worked. Every Aes Sedai since has just led to Rand getting worse and worse. Speaking of Aes Sedai, without anyone to balance them out over the years, they've gotten complacent, and they've gotten to a point where there's literally only a handful of them that are actually capable people, and the rest of them are all incompetents that only get by because they can channel. Look at the cast, okay? Rand has to balance Saladin on the daily or he'll burn up and die. He also has to balance the Dragon and Farm Boy, which he is doing a pretty shit job at, but that shows the whole message of you needing to have balance there or it'll go to shit. Look at Perrin, he needs to balance the wolf and the blacksmith, and Nynaeve needs to balance her emotions. Gwaine and Elaine need to balance which one of them is going to ruin my mood in each book. There are so many examples, and I just feel like Rand's answer kind of missed out on the theme. But maybe I'm judging too early, and going forward in the next 2 books, Rand has achieved some kind of balance, and I just haven't seen that yet. But I haven't seen it yet, so I'm judging it on the ending here, and it does seem like the balance thing wasn't really touched upon properly. I think it would have been better if he came to some kind of realization about needing the hardness, but not too much of it or whatever, balancing out the hardness he's been striving for with some aspect of the farm boy or whatever. Like, you know, the old rule for parents, what is it, kind and firm, I think that's what it is. Something like that, but elevated for the series and for Rand's character. So yeah, I didn't really like the ending to Rand's arc very much. I actually found the Love Again line to be quite cringeworthy, and yes, he did go on to elaborate more and talking about how he gets the chances to correct his failures or something like that, but honestly his answer just really doesn't resonate with me at all after that initial line. But his arc was still an easy 9 out of 10 for me. It just didn't stick the landing at all. There is more to talk about with Rand regarding Elan Morin and Lews Therin. He is constantly thinking and talking as Lews Therin would throughout the book and having his memories as his own. And by the end at Dragonmount, the two have pretty much merged. So the two have become one, just like the Aelfin said needed to happen. So I think the last thing that needs to happen on that little checklist from them is Rand dying again. Dying so he can live again. I've changed my mind on what this means. I initially thought that there would be two Rands, a shadow version of Rand and a light version of Rand. A part of me still thinks that, but I think a more plausible answer is that considering that death is the domain of the Dark One, Rand is going to die so that he can touch the Dark One in his realm of death in order to properly seal him away this time. I've got 3 reasons for thinking this. The first is that unless Sanderson just completely removes the main theme of balance from the series, Rand cannot kill the Dark One. Killing the Dark One should, keeping in line with that theme, be as disastrous as killing the Creator would be, so Rand does need to just seal him away properly this time. The second is how events in certain ages can seem to lead to stories in other ages. What I mean by that is that if you look at the first age as our modern times, Rand taking Kalandor from the Stone of Tyr could be told as a story in our modern time as I've forgotten his name. King Arthur taking Excalibur. I know the third age comes after or whatever, but it's the Wheel of Time. There's no beginnings or endings, so the order isn't important, I assume. And we also see in the Wheel of Time, in the current period during the Third Age, how stories can change depending on the time or region. So, like, the Gleeman tales kind of change from place to place, and so do the songs told in taverns. We've seen that loads of times from Matt and Tom's POVs. What am I getting at with this? Rand dying to seal the Dark One away properly and coming back to life while wearing a crown of laurel leaves with thorns sticking into his head sounds a bit similar to a story during our modern times of some other dude dying wearing a crown of thorns and coming back to life after that. So yeah, I would not be surprised if Rand starts to have a white glowing halo around him as a reverse to the one that Min saw, or not Min, that Tuon saw to complete the Jesus look. The third reason is Lews Therin explaining how he sealed the Dark One away. Originally, he said that something needed to touch the Dark One to close the gap, but he was able to taint it originally, which tainted Saladin. So I'm guessing that the new link between Moradin and Rand is going to end up being crucial, and that Rand will end up dying using the true power in combination with the one power, maybe using the true power as some kind of buffer, because you can't taint what's already tainted, essentially. So he'll use those powers in order to seal the Dark One away properly and then come back to life somehow. Lews Therin went on about there being a third one when talking to Rand, so I don't think that's going to be like a second Rand like I originally thought. I think that's just him talking about Moradin now. Spending too long talking about Rand, so going to zoom through the stuff with Elan Morin. We get a really great interaction where they meet up in the same world from the Eye of the World, and we find out that he and Rand are indeed linked, and that's how Rand can use the true power. I think this meeting was held outside the pattern because Rand noted that Lews Therin wasn't present in his mind while he was there, so I think he used the true power to get out of the pattern for that meeting. I thought it was a really great interaction. I really liked seeing why Elan Morin actually turned to the Shadow. So it turns out that he actually came to the same realization that Rand did at the end of the book at Dragonmount, but came to a more pessimistic conclusion after his findings. So Elan Morin decided that everything repeating was just going to eventually lead to the Dark One eventually winning, so he might as well reap the benefits while he can. So I really liked how his realization mirrored Rand's there. I don't really have a lot more to say that's worth mentioning for the rest of the cast. Next up is Egwene. You all already know my feelings about her by now. I went more in depth with them during my Book 11 review. Not going to repeat myself. A viewer gave their own summary of Egwene's character in the comment section for my Book 11 review, which ended up also being a perfect summary of my own feelings towards her, so just going to read that out really quickly. Egwene has some great moments from the point where she gets captured. However, it's difficult getting on board with her awesomeness since unlike most of the other characters, the narrative doesn't address her flaws or inflict costs on her. Neither is she remorseful, nor even just self-aware like many of our other heroes are, nor does she have people criticizing her, just people telling her she's so awesome. As I replied to the comment, this perfectly sums up my own feelings about Egwene, so thank you for that comment, anonymously opinionated. There you go, I even messed up your name just for you. And her arc in Book 12 is the exact same. I could go on and on about all the moments in this book that made me think something along those lines, but at this point, it's just beating a dead horse. It's just a load of more actions that aren't totally believable to me and interactions with other Aes Sedai. Like, there's a point where Egwene is talking about what she would do to deal with Rand, and it honestly feels like I'm reading a mix of Varian and Cadsuane. And she just keeps busting out these proverbs and talking as if she's always been in the tower saying, "When have we ever and haven't we always?" It just feels very forced to me and very phony. I don't really have much more to say for Egwene. She did have her badass moments. Her confrontation with Elida was great. I think that's the first time I said something from Egwene was great, and it's book 12. It mirrored Rand's after a certain amount of pain. More doesn't really do much realization pretty nicely. And she popped out during the attack. We got the payoff for the White Rod vision from like book 1 or 2. And speaking of visions being paid off, we finally got the Beggar and the Staff visions from who knows when with Rand when he went to Ebudar. Was not crazy about the Shanshan invasion though, if I'm being honest. It was a good crescendo to her arc, but like I've been saying since book 3, I really have zero interest in battles that her characters just getting to be OP for a bit. It was a good climax to her arc. She done all this work in the tower. She gets to get the payoff now, show off a bit. But because it's Egwene, I just don't give a shit about her. It felt like that to me. She just got to be OP with the rod for a bit. And yet again, we see the sheer convenience of Egwene's arc. Literally, nothing happens to anyone of importance during the Shanshan attack, but of course, Elida is captured as to be made the Mani. I mean, it's the most predictable shit ever, just because Egwene gets to be Taviran without actually being Taviran. And Tuon even hyped up these elite assassins that don't do shit during the attack, except pay off another vision for Egwene or Bryn and Swan protecting each other there. They, I think, are still in the tower, so maybe they do something next book. I'm interested in seeing how things with Egwene progress going forward, because it seems like they've kind of done an Uno reverse card thing with her and Rand. Like, now that Rand had his big realization, he's now the one that's all cool, calm, and collected, big, powerful person. And then Egwene is now the one who's all, I will do what needs to be done for the good of the tower, regardless of my own feelings. So they've kind of swapped mentalities a bit, it feels like. So yeah, and you can see that in how she treats the Aes Sedai after the White Tower attack, saying that they need to apologize and all that, even though she was the leader of them, but whatever. Speaking of convenience, Verin, please put down your pitchforks, okay? Verin is amazing. She's the hero of the book for sure, undeniably. She made the ultimate sacrifice in order to collect the most dangerous of information so that she could pass it on and preserve it like a true brand would. Verin is the GOAT. Verin's undeniable greatness aside, though, I think it is extremely convenient that Egwene has just been given this book all of a sudden that contains like 80 to 90% of the names of the Black Azure sisters, as well as detailing whatever other Darkfriend information. Now I'm going to say something people probably won't like. I only think this ending is great because Sanderson wrote it. If Jordan did this with Varian, I wouldn't like it as much. I would still like it, don't get me wrong, just really not nearly as much. The reason being that I think Varian was a lot more sinister than someone just working to obtain information on the Black Asia and Dark Friends in general. It seemed to me like she was a lot more Rand focused. You know, she compelled all the Aiel captive Aes Sedai back in whatever book 8, and then she was pretty damn close to just straight up killing Cadsuane, and this was all relating to Rand ensuring that he makes it to Tarmon Ghaedon. Then there's her time spent with Perrin during books 4 and 2. Vern was a lot more Taviran focused, and her doing all this for some kind of Black Azure research isn't totally believable to me. There are some moments though where looking back I can be like, oh, maybe this is the reason for this or that behaviour from her. But, you know, Jordan unfortunately didn't get the chance to write this, Sanderson did, so it's not really a complaint or criticism from me, more of just a thought. I'm very curious if Varian's compulsion will be addressed though on the Aes Sedai now that she is dead. Aviendha had an arc in this book that I didn't really enjoy. Thought the conclusion was really good. I liked that she had to be the one to decide when enough was enough and that she's a wise one. However, the arc itself was pretty boring and repetitive. I really didn't need to see over and over Aviendha worrying what she did to offend the wise ones, all the while constantly wondering what Elaine would do in her shoes. There was no Elaine in this book, which was easily the best thing about this book. However, Gawain made sure to come in clutch with this signature Tarkhan family shitness. Gawain is awful, the whole Tarkhan family should just be killed off. They produced the worst, most boring story arcs of the series. Initially, I thought Gawain was getting some good characterization. He was split between his decision to serve Elida and his loyalty to Egwene and Elaine, and he was having these nightmares about killing his mentors. But nope, he is just a annoyingly self-centered, spoiled prince who refuses to see reason. He is literally so far behind everybody on the events of the world that it is embarrassing. Gawain, please just catch up and read the previous 12 books, you dickhead. Sure, you could say Gawain is the only one that still acts his age. Personally, I don't care. It's book 12 out of 14, bro. Like, I think, if anything, I think it makes him look a lot worse that he still is. I don't really have much to say for the remainder of the cast. Nynaeve was great as she has been for a while now. Any praise I could give to her in this book would be pretty much the same as I would from the previous few now. Having her as a POV during Rand's arc was great. Seeing Rand from her perspective and seeing how the two played off each other was fantastic. Honestly, I think her and Rand have the best dynamic in the whole series. I'm not sure how popular that take is, but it's pretty much what I've thought since book one when they first met up in Barillon. I think they always play off each other really well, whether they're conflicting or getting along. Swan and Tuon had decent arcs in this book. I liked how Swan got the chance to kind of think about how being Amerlin might have stopped her from experiencing the world like Moraine, and wondering about how being Bryn's attendant has opened up these opportunities for her to make other changes in her life. I thought it was a really good arc for her. I just don't care for the relationships in this series at all, the romantic ones anyways. But Swan and Bryn's are one of the more better established relationships. Tuon is mainly just dealing with being the ruler now that the Shanshan royalty have all been wiped out. The Shanshan are still fascinating as ever with their beliefs and traditions. Like, I thought it was really cool how Tuon thought she had to meet Rand as the daughter of Nine Moons so that she's on equal footings with him. Her arc was enjoyable in general, just seeing how she dealt with being in her new position of power and trying to maintain the stability that has already been established. And we finally get to see what Shamraj meant in Book 9, saying that Tuon was dangerous for Rand when she was able to resist Rand's Taviran pull when he started using that as kind of compulsion. And we saw the black halo form over Rand's head during that scene. It makes me wonder if it works like a video game that has a karma system like Infamous Second Son, you know. The more sinister Rand gets, the more the darkness that Cadsuane and Tuon can see shows itself. Kind of like Matt's dice, you know, the dice start rumbling and then he makes a certain decision and they stop, kind of like a checkpoint. The more sinister decisions Rand's making, the closer he gets to the shadow. Gonna finish this off with a quick shout out to one of my new favourite side characters, Rodel Iturralde. I thought his plan at the start of the book using the fake farmers was beautiful. The planet Derluna, I think it's called, and I love how he exploited the Shanshans over reliance on the Raken. I thought that was so good, and then his reaction to how the enemy general asked why he does it if he knows he's going to lose, and he's like, oh, it's to inspire future generations. It's just a really good moment from Iturralde. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in future books, if he's going to be more of a presence now that he's working under Rand. So that's pretty much all I have to say for this book. Pretty good installment. I'd give it like an 8 out of 10. I liked it less with looking back on it after a while when I let my head cool down a bit. Book 13 review should be out a lot sooner than this one was, so I'll see you guys in the next one. Should be like 2 weeks, I don't know, 3 maybe, sorry.